Australian tourist finds himself locked in a drunk tank just as Hurricane Katrina slams New Orleans.
We just got locked up and we never seen a guard again.
A motorcycle tour of the Himalayan mountains turns into a life and death struggle when an American biker is trapped in a third world hospital.
I just wanted to get out of there more than I've ever wanted to be anywhere else in my life.
A lone hiker in California's remote wilderness plunges off a 60-foot cliff.
I was suddenly pushed out into midair. This is it. I'm dead.
True stories of ordinary people with an extraordinary will to survive. Saturday, August 27th, 2005. 30-year-old Australian Ashley McDonald is cruising down Bourbon Street in New Orleans. It's the first day of a 2-week vacation in America.
It's great. It's good fun. Just walk up and down on the street, in and out of all sorts of bars and clubs. Just relaxed and just having a good time.
Ash, as he likes to be called, is supposed to phone his sister when he arrives in New Orleans.
How's it going? Good, Harry. Good.
But he's too anxious to get out and see the sights.
I just thought that he was misconnecting flights or got held up in customs and that kind of thing.
I'm Aussie, mate. I can drink you under the table. Challenge is up. Yeah!
After midnight, police sweep the French Quarter.
Get off the street.
A storm is coming.
Let's go, folks.
But after a few drinks, Ash isn't ready to let the good times end.
Clear the street, sir. Hey. Okay?
No, I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. I'm just having a...
Yeah, we understand. But you understand you have to get off the street now, okay?
No, I'm just going to go and have another drink, mate. I'll buy you a shot.
Come on, sir. We need you.
Ow.
2 seconds beforehand, I'm having a few drinks, and next thing I'm handcuffed in the back of a police car.
Come on, let's go.
I'm thinking, what have I done, and who have I done it to, and where am I going? So I had no idea where we're going.
The police take Ash to the Orleans Parish Jail.
Hey, Buster. We're booking it for drunk and disorderly.
I explained to them, look, I've only been here for 12 hours.
Empty your box, please. Where are you from?
From Australia. I haven't done anything wrong, okay? I've been in this country for 12
You can talk and empty at the same time. That's fine.
Ash is put in the holding tank so he can sleep it off.
They said, we'll have to detain you until we find out how you got here and who you are. And my passport was in the hotel. Worst case scenario, I thought it'd only be overnight. They'll find out tomorrow morning, or ring my sister tomorrow. That day sort of never came.
Sunday, August 28th, around midnight, the outer winds of a Category 3 hurricane begin battering New Orleans. It's Katrina, the storm of the century.
We started feeling the building shake. The water's coming in through the ceiling, through the skylights.
The jail is like a bomb shelter, but no match for Katrina's raw fury.
Very shortly after that, all the power gets lost.
Hey, come with me right now. Let's go!
The guards move Ash and the other inmates from the drunk tank down to the general population of the city jail.
Let's go, guys! Get in there! Get in there!
Water's coming down, man. Come on. Come on.
We just got locked up, and we never seen a guard again.
Now, the only people in Orleans jail are the inmates, locked in their cells, while the storm rages outside. Hurricane Katrina sweeps over the city in a few hours, but her aftermath is catastrophic. By the next morning, New Orleans is underwater. Ash's sister Jasmine watches the disaster unfold from her home in Nashville, Tennessee.
He hasn't called.
When I heard about the hurricane, I panicked.
I can't get
She calls their father in Australia.
And I said to her, well, he'll call when he's got time or he's got the opportunity.
Have you been watching the news?
Turn the TV on.
We turned CNN on and we could just see the total devastation and chaos.
That's where Ash is.
I'm glued to the TV. Every channel I was flicking over to every piece of news that I could see.
I'm imagining that he is there. As much as you don't want to say it, it was always in the back of your mind that he was a victim of the hurricane. It was just so unlike him not to contact his sister.
By day's end, Ash and the other imprisoned inmates are in serious trouble. The levees protecting New Orleans have broken, and floodwaters are pouring into the jail.
We're gonna drown in here!
The only thing that was going through my mind at that time was, how do I get out, and when am I going to get out?
God!
Who knows, could have been washed away. We'd only need another 3 or 4 feet and we probably would have drowned in ourselves because there's no one there to let us out.
God! We're gonna drown in here! God! Please! Help!
The fear of drowning sparks panic. And without any guards to stop them, a number of inmates are able to escape.
Once a few got out, a few more got out, a few more got out of their cell.
But Ashley and many others don't want to get in even more trouble as escapees, so they stay put.
There was more thinking about my sister because she's probably seen on the news of the storm, of the hurricane that's hit. Still been no word from me.
Back in Nashville, Jasmine is desperate for information.
We didn't know what hotel he was in or what part of New Orleans he was in. We were hearing there were found bodies that had drowned when the levees broke. And then the football stadium, we had reports coming out that people were getting murdered in there because they had thousands all crammed into the football stadium.
Back in Australia, Ash's mom calls the Australian embassy to report him missing.
Okay, is there anything else that you can tell me?
But there's little they can do.
All right, well, please call me as soon as you know anything.
The news shows many refugees being evacuated to Houston, so they immediately book a flight.
We had to be over there closer to the situation.
Needle in a haystack, yes, but we had to try.
My biggest fear was that I'd be bringing him home in a box, actually.
3 days after Katrina, Ash is still in the Orleans Parish Jail with no hope of getting out. At least the floodwaters have stopped rising, but the standing water is rank. The summer heat is unbearable, and there's no food or fresh water.
We had no running water, no power, no air conditioning, sewerage is getting backed up. A lot of the prisoners who have gotten out have come back to sort of help some of their mates get out, and they've brought back a steel pipe, and that got passed around to cell to cell to cell, because we just had to get some sort of ventilation.
On the 4th day, the police finally show up to evacuate the remaining inmates.
They told us in no uncertain terms that if you don't do what you're told, you'll be shot.
The prisoners are put in lifeboats and ferried to a freeway overpass beyond the edge of the floodwaters. Then they are transferred to a prison bus.
I thought I'd get lost forever because no one knew where I was to start with. Now I'm getting transferred who knows where.
300 miles away, Ash's mom and dad land in Houston, Texas. Their first stop is the Astrodome, where thousands of Katrina refugees are housed.
It was absolutely horrendous to see those poor people go through that sort of thing, lost everything.
Hi, my son's been missing for 4 days. Can you please tell me if you've seen him? Excuse me, have you seen my son? He's been missing for 4 days. I think he's here. No, you haven't? All right, I'm going to leave that with you just in case you see him. Excuse me, sir, have you seen this man?
They were all really nice and polite and looked at it and said, no, we haven't seen him. He hasn't crossed my path.
Just when Ash thinks his 4-day-old nightmare can't get any worse, it does. After several hours of travel by boat, then prison bus, he arrives at the Elaine Hunt Correctional Center, a maximum security prison located 70 miles northwest of New Orleans. Now Ash must survive amongst a group of Louisiana's most dangerous criminals.
One had a screwdriver.
Why don't you take it off?
Ashley McDonald is on the vacation from hell. He has been arrested during Hurricane Katrina and barely survived the floodwaters that have engulfed New Orleans. He's been transferred to Elaine Hunt Correctional Center, a high-security prison 70 miles from New Orleans. This is no longer the drunk tank. The prison is full of dangerous, hardened criminals.
This will be your home until we can find somewhere else better for you. And you follow my rules, everything will be fine.
Because there are so many prisoners, the new inmates are put in the outdoor exercise yard.
We're probably in a slightly better position as far as the prison, because at least we've got fresh air.
But there are new dangers at this prison.
Greatest fear at that particular time was getting stabbed. They're all desperate sort of men, all probably starving like myself, gone without food, water.
At one point, Ash discovers what it's like to be a new fish.
Hey, pretty boy, that's a nice clean shirt you got there.
One had a screwdriver and said he needed a dry shirt.
Why don't you take it off? It's a good boy.
Most distressing, Ash still has no idea how long he'll be kept in prison.
I'm still concerned. It's been 5 days, going on 6 days, where I've had no contact with any family member. It's just very frightening and concerning that I haven't been able to be released, haven't been able to tell anyone where I am.
Back in Tennessee, Jasmine gets a call from the Australian embassy.
Have you got news?
At first, it sounds promising.
Oh, that's great. Where is he?
They said that they'd found Ashley's credit cards. They'd been used at a motel at Baton Rouge.
Checking in?
Yeah.
Jasmine is told that 2 ex-cons have been arrested for using Ash's credit cards.
Where'd you get these cards?
The police think that foul play might be involved.
All right. They found the cards, but they didn't find him. 2 guys stole them.
It was devastating news to find out that his credit cards and wallet had been found, and there was no sign of Ashley.
To me, that was the end. You know, these people have got his card. There's no way he'd hand them over, so Ashley's gone.
You could feel the shakes just all over, just the cold shakes. This was it.
They were with other...
He's been murdered. There's just no other way around it. So we flew up to Tennessee to be with Jasmine so that when they did find his body, we were all together.
It was probably our way of admitting that we were done. There was nothing more we could do. And it was heartbreaking. It was a real hard time.
Now, do you know him? Did you take these from him?
But the credit cards turn out to be a good lead. When the thieves tell police they'd escaped from the Orleans Parish Jail during the hurricane.
Where'd you get these cards?
Took them from the property room.
Is that right? Huh?
Now police know that Ash was at the Orleans Jail. And they know those prisoners were moved to the Hunt Correction Center.
I got a call from the Australian Federal Police officer later on that night, and they said, we found him, we found Ashley.
He's alive!
I was over the moon about it. Once I composed myself, he said he's in prison. I was like, what? And it didn't even bother me that he was in prison. I was like, well, I'd rather him be in prison than dead.
It takes a couple more days for Louisiana authorities to clear Ash and release him.
Sign here.
And finally, after 13 grueling days in prison, his ordeal has come to an end. He goes straight to his sister's house in Tennessee.
The best part of the whole ordeal was to see him drive in the driveway with the consulate staff.
He's here.
He was safe, he was well, and he was home, and he had survived.
Hi.
He'd lost a lot of weight, he was sunburnt, he was starving, but he was alive.
I didn't realise everyone would be there, but my sister, brother-in-law, her kid, and my parents were all there. And it was good to get there, actually. Everyone was just really glad that I'd gotten out, happy that I got home.
He looked very thin, totally different to what he was when he left to go over there. But I was very, very pleased to see him.
Even though I don't think I did a great deal wrong, but yeah, I've learnt my lesson, and it's something you just chalk up to experience and something you just remember for the rest of your life.
As an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Larry Stern knows motorcycle riding is dangerous. But he's also an adrenaline junkie who has a passion for international biking adventures.
It is a tremendously enjoyable thing to do. You got to see things that you would never otherwise see. Beautiful places, only reachable by motorcycle.
In October 2010, Larry joins a group touring through Bhutan, a small third-world country nestled in a remote part of the Himalayan mountains.
It was a beautiful day. Scenery was very dramatic.
Larry is riding just behind the leader. They're on a two-lane highway hugging a mountain. There's no center marker, no shoulders, no guardrails. A mechanic's truck follows a ways behind the group in case of a breakdown.
We made a turn to the left and lost sight of the leader as he made the turn. I completed my turn and found myself looking face to face at a very, very wide industrial truck.
Dr. Larry Stern is on a once-in-a-lifetime motorcycle tour through a remote part of the Himalayan mountains.
It was a beautiful day. Scenery was very dramatic.
After coming around a blind corner, Larry finds himself head-to-head with a truck.
I immediately felt ribs break, and I felt my clavicle, collarbone, break. Two thoughts went through my head. I thought, well, that's the end of this trip. And the next thing was, how bad is this?
Talk to me. Are you all right?
As a doctor, he's the only one able to assess his injuries.
3, 2, and go!
The majority of the pain that I was having was in my chest.
Watch it.
Not a good thing.
Should we try to sit you up?
But if you break enough ribs, that's fatal without proper medical support.
Wait. Back up.
And if you're unlucky enough to puncture the lung, then you have a very dangerous situation.
Okay, just stay still. Stay calm, Larry.
I was thinking about these things, and I remember saying, okay, well, you're going to find out over the next 5 to 10 minutes whether you're going to survive this thing.
He knows he has to get to a hospital as soon as possible. But in this third world country, there's no ambulance rushing to the scene. The only option is the mechanic's truck.
Watch his head, watch his head.
The only decision was to take me back to the only hospital in Bhutan, which is back in the major city of Thimphu.
Go!
It was a horrific ride.
Just try to relax.
Every jostle, every movement is bad. I could feel the bones moving in my chest. It was very, 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 very painful.
But on arrival, Larry's relief is short-lived. It's a very basic facility, and some of the staff are clearly inexperienced.
Namaste, Mr. Stern. How are you?
After x-rays are taken, a radiologist gives Larry the results.
Dr. Stern.
Oh, Dr. Stern.
I'm an orthopedic surgeon.
Oh, very nice. Then you've seen these before?
Yes.
Let's take a look, shall we? Well, as you can clearly see, the second and the third rib are broken, and you fractured your clavicle too.
I think you might have missed a couple of ribs here on the other side, Doctor.
Oh, yes.
I can feel.
Oh, I see what you mean.
What about my ankles?
Oh, your ankle. Oh, let's see. I think we have an x-ray for that too. Is there pain in your ankle, Dr. Stern?
Pretty sure they're both broken.
Both are broken. Well, I only have one x-ray in front of me. Yes, I can clearly see it is broken.
He missed 2 of the fractures, so I had to point out to him, holding my side, that there were fractures in my ankle and my knee.
Larry suffered at least 5 broken ribs, a broken collarbone, a fractured knee, and 2 broken ankles. But the damage to his lungs, including fluid buildup, could be life-threatening.
Broken bones can be handled, but, breathing is of paramount concern. And I would constantly be having a reflexive urge to cough. Every time I would have to cough, I would scream.
As a doctor, Larry knows the kind of care he needs. And he fears that if he keeps deteriorating, the staff may not be able to keep him alive. He has one hope.
I had a cell phone, which fortunately worked in Bhutan, and was able to contact MedJet Assist.
It's Larry.
Which was the organization that I belonged to that would evacuate me.
In need of immediate help.
John Goebbels is one of several people in direct contact with Larry.
Dr. Stern was very concerned. He said he had a better idea of his actual injuries than the doctor currently taking care of him.
I'm not sure if I'm in the emergency room or if this is the entire hospital.
You could tell that he was suffering and in a lot of pain. Dr. Stern's primary concern was really getting evacuated from that hospital as soon as possible.
But Larry can be evacuated only if his lungs haven't been punctured. He needs a CAT scan to determine that. The one machine in the country is not immediately available, so he has to wait. It's the worst night of his life.
I talked to my kids. It was very emotional, a lot of crying. Everybody just wanted me to get home where I could get proper medical attention because I knew my breathing was getting worse. When I would ask for more pain medication,
morphine.
They gave me the Bhutanese equivalent of Man Up.
For the pain, get the doctor.
I lay awake that first night thinking I was going to die here.
After a severe motorcycle crash in a remote area of the Himalayan mountains, Dr. Larry Stern is trapped in a third-world hospital. He suffered 5 broken ribs, and his lungs are filling up with fluid. As he begins his second day, Larry is feeling desperate. He's worried if his lungs start to deteriorate, there's no guarantee he'll survive long enough to be airlifted back to a hospital in the United States.
I just wanted to get out of there more than I've ever wanted to be anywhere else in my life.
Larry is fearful and distressed, so he reaches out to a friend and fellow doctor back home in Minnesota.
Hey, Dan.
I wanted to know the extent of his injuries to help him make some decisions about whether he was capable of making the trip.
The CAT scan finally arrives.
Hello, Dr. Stern. You have 10 fractured ribs, not 5, and there is fluid collecting in your lungs. But the good news is that there are no punctures, which means you can tolerate flying. Good luck, Dr. Stern.
I called MedJet.
How fast can you make arrangements to come get me?
And they told me that they had some bad news for me. And I said, what? And they said that they could not get anybody to fly into the airport to evacuate me because it was just too high and no one would risk it.
The airport there is one of the world's most dangerous airports to actually land in. From 2009, there really had been only about 10 pilots certified to land at that airport.
The airport is in a deep valley, surrounded by 18,000-foot mountains. At the end of a brutal second day, MedJet calls back.
They said that they had made arrangements for a Indian charter service, that they would fly this turboprop in and take me from there to Delhi, where eventually they would arrange for a jet to transport me home.
The plane will arrive the next day. It's the news he's been waiting for, but has it come too late? Larry's not at all sure he'll survive the night.
Every time I would fall asleep, my respirations would slow, and then I would wake up with terrible air hunger, and I would violently expand my chest, and I would scream again. I was clearly getting worse. I was very afraid I was going to die.
The next morning, still in agony, Larry is taken to the local airport.
I see the airplane. This was not a medical airplane, and there was no way that they were able to get me into the airplane except that I was going to have to walk.
Step by agonizing step, Larry hobbles forward on his 2 broken ankles. The pain sears up his legs. He nearly passes out. Once on board, the plane must lift off as quickly as possible to get over the mountains.
I suddenly hear the computerized voice saying, "Pull up.
Pull up.
We are too close to the terrain."
Pull up. Pull up.
I get very, very scared.
Pull up.
The plane safely climbs out of the valley. Several hours later, Larry is relieved to have landed in New Delhi, India. But before he can board the jet, he must pass through airport security.
They brought in a special man whose job it was to do a very detailed body search.
How are you, sir?
When he felt my clavicle move, kind of pulled back a bit.
क्या problem इसको?
He was determined to do his job.
हाँ वो तो ठीक है लेकिन ये कुछ problem लग रहा है इसको.
And eventually was able to get to the airplane.
Once on board the specially equipped jet and monitored by 2 nurses, he finally feels safe for the first time since his accident.
It was an amazing sense of relief to be with these people that were going to take me home.
After a series of fuel stops, a full day after leaving Bhutan, they finally land in Minneapolis, St. Paul. After multiple surgeries and a brief stay in the hospital, Larry continues his recovery at home. 14 months later, he is back on a bike, and he's never considered giving it up.
People would say to me afterwards, well, you're not going to ride again. You must have a death wish. And I would say, no, I have a life wish. I enjoy riding in the dangerous sport I do, not because of the danger. It's very life-affirming.
August 4th, 2003. 46-year-old Amy Racina is on a 2-week backcountry trek through Kings Canyon National Park in Central California.
I've been hiking and camping all of my life, and so I love the wilderness. I've always been drawn to it.
As the highlight of her trip, Amy is hiking into a remote section of the park, the Tehipite Valley. A 1-mile deep canyon flanked by granite walls.
Tehipite Valley is an amazing area, very wild, very remote, and it's very difficult to get to. The trails are very steep and treacherous. The average backpacker doesn't go there.
But Amy is not your average backpacker. And she's going into this beautiful, isolated High Sierra Valley alone.
She is a very driven woman. I don't think anything would have stopped her. If someone were to say, you can't do this, she would most certainly do it.
The trail leading down steepened rapidly. I'm creeping carefully along the hillside, and I'm holding on to a rock with my left hand and a tree with my right hand. I reached out my right foot. As I did so, I was suddenly pushed out into midair. This is it. I'm dead.
While hiking the remote and dangerous trails of Tehipite Valley in Central California, Amy Racina attempts to cross a steep hillside.
I'm creeping carefully along the hillside, and I reached out my right foot. As I did so, I was suddenly pushed out into midair. This is it. I'm dead. I was certain my life would be over.
Amy has fallen 60 feet and landed on solid rock.
And my first thought is, I'm still alive.
Amy's nose is smashed. A front tooth is snapped off. Her left hip is broken, but worst of all is her right leg.
I looked down at my right knee, and it was a gaping open crater of blood and flesh. And I remember thinking, this is not good. I was so badly damaged that I was incapable of lifting my legs. And for a hiker, that is a sentence of death. I thought of my son. He was only 15 years old, and I thought he'll have to go on without a mom. The first danger to my life was very simply that I would bleed to death sitting there on the rock. I knew I had to stop the bleeding in my knee. I wrapped a sarong that I carry as extra clothing tightly around the knee. It wasn't exactly a tourniquet, but it was tight enough, I hoped, to stop the bleeding. And then I found that I was going into shock. I was shaking uncontrollably. I knew from first aid training that simple hot liquids would help the shock. So I made myself a cup of hot chicken soup.
The soup stops the shaking, but Amy is still cold. The temperature is dropping. Because she can't move her legs, Amy can't get inside her sleeping bag, so she uses it like a blanket. Then passes out. The new day brings a grim realization. Amy's trapped in a steep ravine next to a small creek. There's no way she can climb out.
Help! I knew it was a grim situation. I was 25 miles from the nearest road access. Help! I knew where I was, but my friends and family didn't know where I was, and they didn't expect me back for 4 more days.
The risk of hiking alone now weighs heavily. She has no one to help her and no way to communicate.
I called out occasionally just in case anybody would be passing by, but it was almost as though I was talking to myself. I thought that this is where I was going to die, but I wasn't ready to die. I really, really wanted to live. So from that moment on, everything that I did and every thought that I had was to make my being alive the probable outcome. I thought, if I could just manage to pull myself down this ravine and lay myself across the larger trail, there's still a chance that I might be found before time runs out.
Amy knows there's only one way out, down the tiny stream in the ravine. So she stuffs her gear into plastic bags and goes for it.
I still can't move my legs. So my plan was to sit on my butt, push my limp legs in front of me, and pull myself with my hands. It was a lot more difficult than I anticipated. The stream, being snowmelts, was ice cold, and that turned out to be a benefit because it numbed some of the pain.
At one point, Amy slips into a deep pool of water with steep rock sides.
And I remember thinking, if I pass out now, I will drown in this pool of water.
She's used all her strength getting out of the water. She's done for the day. Now she needs to dry off and warm up before nightfall, or she could die of hypothermia. She makes herself another meal and realizes the horrible reality of her situation. She's only moved about 100 yards. All she can do now is try to go to sleep and start again in the morning. Very few people hike into the Tehipite Valley each year, usually no more than a couple dozen. So chances are slim that Amy will ever be found alive. And yet, on this August day, 3 hikers from Northern California are descending into the valley. Jake Van Akkeren, his wife Leslie, and their friend Walter Kieser. They're all experienced hikers, and they're on the same dangerous 25-mile trail that Amy took just days before.
We got to the rim and looked in there and said, my, that's going to be interesting getting down.
You often couldn't see the trail. It was so overgrown. You kind of feel your way.
"4,000 feet below Walter, Jake, and Leslie, Amy is facing another desperate day of survival in the ravine. She is determined to continue with her plan of pushing her broken body down the stream. mid-afternoon, Amy comes to a small dam in the stream. But because of her injuries, she can't pull herself over the dam.
I realized that this was as far as I was physically going to be able to go, and this is where I was going to make my last stand.
Help!
Just one more time, at the end of that day, I called out, "Help me! I'm tired of this adventure. Is anybody out there?"
I was ahead of Jake and Leslie, and I heard somebody cry for help. Did you hear that?
I remember saying to Leslie, it sounds like a wounded animal.
No, it sounds human.
Hello! I shouted back several times, hello! No reply to that, so I had a whistle with me.
I screamed at the top of my lungs.
I'm here!
I knew that this was my only chance.
I'm gonna go check it out.
Jake leaves Leslie on the trail and follows the sound of Amy's cries.
I scrambled through the trees, and that's when I saw this person. I could tell she was really hurt, and I thought something awful has happened.
And he came over and he sat down next to me, and he said ever so gently, he said, "Can I touch you?"
She looked as if she needed a hug.
And put his arm very carefully around me. And he said just the right thing. He said, "We're not going to leave you." And I cried some more. I was just so incredibly grateful to see a real, live human being.
We're gonna get you out of here.
I knew at that point that everything was going to be okay.
What's your name?
Jake isn't so sure.
Walter!
Walter has first aid training and checks Amy's vitals. She has a rapid heartbeat, elevated temperature, and dilated pupils.
These are all signs that I'm slipping into septic shock.
She looked terrible. She had blood all over her.
Walter suspects that Amy has a very bad blood infection from her open wound.
Be right back.
I really wasn't certain whether Amy would survive. I had some sense that, from her condition, that she might die.
Amy Racina has fallen off a 60-foot cliff. Her left hip and right leg are severely broken, so she can't walk. Now, 2 days later, Walter Keyser and Jake Van Akkeren have discovered her barely alive in the remote wilderness of Kings Canyon National Park.
I really wasn't certain whether Amy would survive. I had some sense that she might die during the night and that we had to be prepared for that.
Quietly, Walter and Jake make a plan. Because it's too dangerous to hike out of the steep canyon at night, Jake will stay with Amy in the ravine while Walter and Leslie camp nearby. At dawn, Walter will run out to get help.
I'm gonna stay with you, okay?
The only question is, will Amy still be alive?
We said goodnight to one another. Then after a while, I could tell that she was sleeping. I really sensed that she thought things were going to turn out perfectly okay. I wasn't so sure.
At first light, Walter is on the trail. But before he runs all the way out of the valley, he needs to know if Amy is still alive.
If she were dead, I would be walking. If she were alive, I would be running.
Within a half hour, Walter reaches a spot on the trail near Amy and Jake. He stops and blows his whistle twice. It's a prearranged signal. When Jake whistles back twice, Walter knows that Amy is alive.
I had to be prepared to go 25 miles, which is a long way. But the first part of it was a 6,000 vertical climb out of the canyon on a very rugged trail. I just moved up the trail as fast as I could.
Late afternoon of the fourth day, We finally hear a sound overhead.
Whap, 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 whap. Very distant.
Hey!
It was unmistakably a helicopter.
2 park rangers are dropped into the valley by helicopter. The first to reach Amy is Debbie Brenchley.
First saw Amy, she looked really bad.
But she was smiling. So I realized at that point that at least her attitude is really good and we have a chance to get her out of here.
Debbie can tell that Amy is in real trouble. The infection is raging through her body.
I didn't think she was going to have that much time. That tight canyon was going to be really difficult to get her out of there.
Debbie knows that Amy's only chance for survival is to airlift her out of the canyon.
From our previous locations,
A dicey maneuver in the best of conditions. First, they drop a Bowman bag down to the rescue site.
I've always been afraid of heights, but now I was even more terrified. But I knew I really didn't have much choice, so I said to Debbie, how long is it going to take? And she said, 3 minutes. And she said, it's going to hurt like hell. They put me into the helicopter, and just about 10 minutes later, I was at the hospital in Fresno.
Right off the medevac, Doc.
There isn't a moment to spare. Doctors determine that Amy is just a few hours from dying.
Right now. Okay, let's go. Let's go.
None of these amazing people ever told me how very close I was to death. They did their job. They got me out alive.
There's a lot of rescues that rangers do, but this was an amazing rescue because it was one of those that you knew you made a difference, that you saved a life.
Noticed a great deal of change in her. She was very grateful to be alive.
When I look back on this experience now, I'm not happy that it happened. I have an incredibly enhanced appreciation for life every single moment that I live. I could so easily have died on that day, and I didn't, so each moment is a gift.